This is our first official podcast episode of Pathways and Paychecks. How are you, Allie?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
So, Drashti, why did you want to start this podcast?
One of the biggest reasons is, well, first of all, how long have I known you? Like 14 years, right?
Yeah,
I think
it's been a long time.
I met you in our physics class in 2008, maybe? That sounds about right.
Yeah, that might
right.
be right. Oh, so it's more than 14 years.
Yeah, we're terrible at live math right now.
It's been a long time.
But I remember you said, no, I thought you were unfriendly and you thought I was weird.
That may ring a bell. A slight bell, yeah.
We've come long ways, let's say that.
We did. We did.
And then college comes around, and for the longest time, I did not know what I wanted to do, and you've heard lots and lots about it. I'm sure you remember that.
A lot. You changed your mind at least 7 times.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yep.
So I think at one point I wanted to be a doctor, I wanted to be a dentist, I wanted to be a PA.
You wanted to be a businesswoman.
I did want to be a businesswoman, and I still want to, so that's not, that dream hasn't ended yet. And then eventually I got to pharmacy. But at the time, I didn't know what my options were, what my skills were, what my interests would lie in. Because sometimes when you're younger, you don't know what the actual work life is going to look like.
Well, and it's hard because you go to college at, 18, and you're expected to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? You've never lived, really, as an adult. And it's hard. And I think even things like knowing what you mentioned work life, what you want your life to be like, because we work to live, right? Yeah. We work to provide a salary so that we can enjoy our lives.
Absolutely.
You want to find a job that you enjoy.
Exactly.
But you also want that job to be able to support the lifestyle you want.
Yeah.
People have no idea what they're getting themselves into.
I agree.
When they start this out. They're like, oh, that sounds fun.
I know.
You know, I like these aspects.
Yeah.
And then so many people I know go for one thing and end up doing a completely different job after the fact.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is the reason. I think, like, when people listen to us, I want them to have options, first of all, and then also know what it looks like to be in that role. And then also have options to try different things or try different skills or try like volunteering or try asking other people who are in the field more questions about it.
So really, you're hoping people can learn from our lessons and figure out a better way to figure out what they want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Give them some options to understand what it's really like out there in the real world that they say, right? With the air quotes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll talk about how I got to my profession. So how I ended up choosing pharmacy. So I talked about like the few options I was thinking of. So medicine, funny enough. I always thought I wanted to be a pediatrician until I shadowed one. For me, I love kids, but like the kids are coming in super sick. They're crying. Most of them are crying. Thirdly, they don't really want to be seen by you because they just think you're going to do something unpleasant to them. But also when I shadowed the pediatrician, he was a very nice guy, a very nice doctor. But when it just seemed too mundane for me. Like I just seemed like I was counting the number of patients I had to shadow that day until I could go home. So that was out. Dentistry.
But that was cool. Hold on, let's pause on that. That's cool because I think a lot of people don't necessarily shadow. That was clever because you weren't paid for that. It wasn't an internship. You did this in high school or college?
I did it in college.
Was it a part of the schools?
No.
So you just did this on your own?
I actually randomly emailed a few pediatricians, and luckily one of the ones near my home, my parents' home, he agreed to it because most of the time we're asking to do like a full paperwork, and they said they didn't have any spots, or they would say, we don't like let anyone just come and shadow. So luckily I was able to do it over my winter break one of the years. That's really neat because it kind of gives you firsthand visual of what to expect. And it's probably hard now too because of all of the HIPAA rules and things.
Exactly. There's probably some ropes you have to jump through to get there, but that's good. That's a good idea. Okay, so that was out. You were no longer interested in medicine. Yeah. But your background, your education, because you were still in college, was in the sciences?
Yeah, I started with a chemistry major, but then I changed it to biology and psychology, which I loved.
Okay.
Psychology was really interesting, and it also helped me balance my GPA.
Why was it not as hard as the biology for you?
Maybe it wasn't as hard, but also because it was more interesting. But yeah, I think
Okay.
biology and chemistry were just a little harder
Okay.
to get like the amazing grades.
Fair. Okay. So medicine was out, and then you thought dentistry. Why did you hop to dentistry?
I liked the dental, I mean, not the dental field in general, but I do like medicine and the healthcare in general. So I was still thinking of PA school and dental school. But for dental school too, I realized I did not have the geographic capability, and it's weird to say that, but I don't think people realize how you have to be able to do a lot of like mental mapping and know how to, like, for example, if you look at a 3D image, you know how like even on the entrance exam, like it's called the DAT, I think. I was looking through one of those books at one point, and I was getting all the questions wrong for when you have to like imagine what's on the other side of like this weird looking image. So you have to like imagine.
Oh.
So I wasn't good at that.
You had to be able to like create the 3D structure in your head.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just one of those skills that people don't realize you need until you're, like,
Doing it
or
Yeah.
looking more at it. So that was out for me too.
Okay. All right.
I was still considering PA school.
And why were you considering PA if you didn't want to go the medicine route? First of all, what is a PA? People may not know what a PA is.
A physician's assistant.
Okay, and
so,
what is that?
So a physician's assistant is also doing the same things a doctor basically does, but they still have a supervising doctor under them.
Okay.
So sometimes they can independently work at locations like, like the minute clinic or urgent cares or primary care too.
So why, if you didn't want to do medicine, did you still want to do PA?
I was still considering it because I didn't know what my other options would be.
Okay. What about your parents? Did your parents want you to go into a certain field? Like, did that have any influence on that or not really?
It did, for sure, because I think even right now my dad will sometimes joke like, "Oh, you didn't become a doctor. You almost could have." And I'm like, "No, I didn't. I don't think I would have been a happy doctor."
Right.
Physician's assistant, I think I was considering because it was like fewer years of studying compared to med school. But even then, I decided it wasn't my thing.
Okay.
I think one of the reasons is what you cited too, because tell us a little bit about yourself now. Like, what got you interested in where you are now? And I know you were considering healthcare too when you started.
Yeah, so I went to school thinking I was going to be a nurse because both my parents were nurses. And for a while, my mom later became a teacher. And I knew I did not want to be a teacher. I had a ton of family members that were teachers, and I do not have the patience to do that job. So I knew that was never in question. But I had seen, that they had both been nurses. They knew a ton about healthcare. They were great role models. And I thought, oh, let me be a nurse too. I'll carry on the family tradition.
That's right.
And when I went to school and started learning a little bit more about nursing, because at this point I was still very early in, I very quickly learned that I'm a hypochondriac. And I pass out easily. I do not do well with any type of body issue. Like, it's just not for me. And they were very glad that I changed my mind because they knew that it was not going to work out well. And one thing I'll give them credit for is they didn't tell me not to do it, because then I just would have done it.
Oh, it's the opposite of me.
Oh yeah, no, they would have been like, you need to be a nurse, and I would have said absolutely not. Or they said you shouldn't be a nurse, and I would have become a nurse. I was just like defiant. So thank goodness I changed my mind there. And then I was in a similar boat. I was like, okay, well, now what?
Yeah.
I didn't know. And so my mom suggested just taking a bunch of random classes because I was still in a period where, like, when you go to school, you generally have a year or two of having electives, your gen eds, they call them. And I was fortunate. I didn't have to do that because a lot of my high school curriculum counted towards college. So I didn't have to take psychology. I didn't have to take some of the basic classes. So she said, try some things, try some new things. So I took a business class, and then I took management information systems, like intro class, which was your first intro into technology, unless you were going to go the computer science route.
Okay.
And I was hooked. I loved it. I thought everything about it was cool because On the business side, if you get a business degree, you learn a lot about a bunch of different fields. You learn about accounting, finance, you learn about law, business law specifically, ton of really interesting things. And then you generally, at the school I went to, then you would specialize in a field within there. So if you want to become an accountant, you would go for accounting, and then you would take a CPA certification. So
I like that.
Yeah, it was cool. So I wanted to do the technology route, and I chose management information systems instead of computer science because computer science didn't have the business piece with it.
Oh, okay.
And I knew I wanted to learn how to develop, how to do code, how to learn about, infrastructure and different things, but I didn't want to specialize in like just coding and development. I wanted to have a more broad understanding.
Yeah,
because I thought you'd get to move around a little bit more.
Yeah, I like that your school provided those options to you. That way you could try a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it was really nice. And I had a couple of great professors. And I remember when I first went to college, I was so overwhelmed because before I had chosen a major, there were such big classes. I didn't know what I wanted to do. There was nobody, no leaders, no professors there that I just, could talk to. But once I specialized, once I got into a division, then you had a better rapport with the professors because they were smaller class sizes, and I got to learn a lot more about things that they had done, and that helped too. Yeah. But one thing I remember with you, because you went back and forth between what your degree was going to be. You mentioned that you ended up with biology and psychology. You went back and forth on these different things. How did you end up in pharmacy? Because you're a pharmacist now.
Yeah.
So how did you end up there?
So, like I said earlier, I was debating between either doing like a PA school, and I was also considering pharmacy because it was pretty close to healthcare. But like you said, it didn't involve like diagnosing people. And for some reason, I thought I wouldn't be as good as in diagnosing people rather than I would be with like medication management in general.
I mean, it sounds like you did a lot of, I'm impressed because when you talk about, the 3D imaging that you had to understand in dental and you knew that wasn't the right fit for you, or, you thought a lot about what your skill sets were and where your challenges were.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is clever. I didn't think about that at all. I mean, the hypochondria thing was kind of glaring, right? You can't really look past that, but...
So I think we had different approaches. You looked at your interest and your, I guess you looked more at your interest and what you weren't good at.
Yeah.
But, I kind of did a similar thing too.
I guess it was similar, but mine was not that I wasn't good at it, is that I couldn't survive it.
That's
right?
fair.
I would be passed out on the floor trying to help the patients. It wasn't going to work out.
Yeah. So I basically eliminated options based on what my weaknesses were, I guess.
Did you do any shadowing in pharmacy like you did in pediatrics?
So after graduation, I took a year off, which is when I was planning on taking the GRE, which is for PA school, and then also the PCAT for pharmacy school. So again, both the entrance exams. Okay. And then during the year off, I was planning on working as a pharmacy tech, which I was able to. So that's when I started working in community pharmacy officially. So technically the title was tech, and then when I got into pharmacy school, it was a pharmacy intern.
Okay.
So again, I had already kind of made up my mind I was going to do one or the other, but then once I got into pharmacy school, because before, I keep going back and forth, but for PA school, I had to have a certain amount of clinical hours to apply. So my idea of doing pharmacy tech position was to get hours for PA school, and also, so it was kind of hitting both the options.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm following, so you had to have certain requirements to get into school.
Yeah. And
you knew you either wanted to be a pharmacist or a PA.
Right.
And what you chose was pharmacy to get those hours. Right. And in doing so, you decided, I want to be a pharmacist. Like, I like this job.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do. So it eliminated PA from your options. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's when I started.
But we took a little bit of a different approach there too, because when you go into the medical field, and I'm lumping pharmacy in with medical, even though I don't know if that's accurate or if it's like another swim lane altogether.
Yeah.
But you generally have school, your undergrad, and then you have to immediately go into additional education, grad school, specifically for that field with internships and different things to get there.
Yeah.
I went a different route. I had a business degree with tech background, and I immediately went into work.
Right.
And then later, I ended up getting my MBA while I was working. Right. And what I would just say to anybody, if you're thinking about taking that path that I did, consider getting your secondary education prior to having children.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
I did it with 2 kids, and it was tough.
Yeah.
It was really tough. So with that, I think we gained different things. You gained a lot of experience, not only in the subject matter, right? But you were able to shadow and do some of that.
Yeah.
Whereas I took the education, immediately applied it, and it was more of the hands-on experience only, right? That continued to grow for me.
So just backing up a little bit, why don't you tell us about how you got the job? Because I think it's really important to highlight some of the skills and just how you got there in general.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I graduated early, about a year early. And so at the time, because you got to remember, I was 19, and I just feel like I didn't really know what to expect. I knew that I wanted to get a job. I knew I wanted to be independent. I knew those things, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do, what the jobs would look like, or what I would be able to get that quickly, you know? So especially at such a young age, I was a little concerned about, would people hire me full time, you know, a 19-year-old, 20-year-old. And so I went down 2 paths. I thought about taking an internship because most people that were applying for jobs had done some type of internship, and I had not. So I thought about doing an internship and then extending my education and getting a secondary degree, like a double major or something like that. And I also went the path of looking for full-time positions. And I ended up getting a full-time job and went straight into that. And I'm so glad that it worked out that way because I really have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate. But when I was going through that application process, I'll talk about the full-time because that's the one that I remember more so than the internship route. But when you're looking for the full-time jobs, for me, I looked at companies that had programs geared toward early career.
Okay.
And I thought that was important because you can apply for an entry-level position at different companies, but when you looked for companies that had programs specifically for early career, to me, the company was saying, we care about having new talent, right? And we want to foster that. We want to invest in new talent, specifically young, innovative, right out of college talent. And I thought that was important. So I looked for companies that had those programs. They generally had very rigorous application processes because a ton of people would apply from various colleges. And a lot of them would go and send representatives to the colleges to try to, encourage applicants. So I applied for a few. The 2 offers that I got, one of them was for a more local company, and it was a technology-based company, and my job was going to be around product development and sales. And the other offer that I got was it had nothing to do with sales. It was a healthcare company, and it was more of a rotational type of program where I would do various roles over a period of time, and then I would choose and specialize in one of those options. And I thought that was going to be better for me because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought project management sounded cool, but I didn't really know what that was, right? Okay. So that's kind of how I went down that path. And one of the big things for me in finding those 2 jobs was networking, which I hated. I absolutely hated it because I'm an introvert.
Yeah, same.
But it was so important because they would send the representatives to the schools, the teachers, because I had networked with the professors and I had rapport with the professors and they knew I was a strong student. They put my name forward. And then I was able to build a relationship with those career, the recruiters. Okay. And then I went through the application process. So it worked out really well for me. Yeah.
So speaking of which, I just realized we haven't really talked about what your official title is. And I feel like even after these years of knowing you, I don't know what your title is.
Most people ask me that, and I hate it because it's hard when I explain it, they don't know what I'm talking about. So I work in program and portfolio delivery leadership.
Okay, that was a
Now,
mouthful.
it is a mouthful. I've had various roles in there with slightly different titles and versions of it, so I just kind of lump it all in that. And basically, what it is, when you think about these large companies, and it doesn't really matter the industry. It could be healthcare, it could be banking, it could be, really any industry where corporate industry specifically, they have large projects that need to be delivered. It could be they need to upgrade their systems. They want to introduce new technology. They want to change business process. Whatever it is that they're trying to do, it requires a lot of work internally for different employees to come together and build the technology, sometimes working with vendors, different things. And when they do that, that body of work is called a project.
Okay.
So you can manage a project. You can be a project manager and work across all of the different people that come together and all of your stakeholders who want to know how it's doing.
Yeah.
That's a project manager. A bunch of projects, a suite of projects that are related is a program. Okay. And a bunch of programs or projects that are not related brought together is a portfolio.
Oh, okay.
So I manage multiple portfolios
All right.
of work. And so I got there starting actually kind of at the lower level where I managed a project and I kind of worked my way up. But that's what it is. It's also people get it confused a lot with portfolio management, thinking at finance, like
Makes sense.
stocks.
Yeah.
Manage. I don't do that. I don't understand. I wish I understood it, but I don't know what that is.
You know what I was thinking while you were talking? The Friends episode where no one knows what Chandler Bing does? I think that would be us. Even people who know you would probably blank out what they're...
One of the roles that I had, I did this over a data and analytics organization, which I absolutely loved. And when I would explain it, the title was Analytics Governance Manager. Nobody
Fancy.
had a clue what that meant, right? And it was really hard to describe. And so I think I actually like that we're talking about this because people may not even know that these are fields,
absolutely.
right? At least when you say pharmacist, people know you don't have to explain it.
True.
You say, I'm a pharmacist. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But you know what I hate about that? Because
What?
what people sometimes come up to the counter and tell us, especially when I worked in retail, hey, you just have to slap a label on the bottle. Why is it taking so long?
Yeah, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so on that note, why is it not that? Let's explain, what is it that you actually do? Why is it not just slapping a label on the bottle?
All right. Well, to give you an example, first of all, community pharmacies tend to be so busy.
Community pharmacy, that's retail?
Retail, yes.
Okay.
The words are pretty interchangeable. Other people prefer it to be called community pharmacy because it needs to be what, taking care of the community instead of just being what you think when you think about a Walmart or something.
Okay.
So, again, we get tons of prescriptions from different physicians, hospitals. So when the prescriptions come in, first of all, the data needs to be entered. Then it needs to be verified to make sure that it's appropriate for the dosage, patients' allergies, patients' the indication for what they're being treated for. And we have to assess other medications the patient's on to make sure there's no interactions, things like that. So again, and so much is happening in the background too, we're getting phone calls we need to address, and then we're doing immunizations on the side. So it's a lot of hustle.
I mean, that's a good point because people come in and say, hey, I need to get my flu shot or this or that, and you're doing that too. Well, let me ask you this. You found yourself in the pharmacy field. You went to school for, how many years did you have to go to school for?
4 years.
After your undergrad?
So yes, so a lot of what other people do, some people also have the option of doing 2 years of gen ed, the gen eds, or just a prereqs. You don't even have to finish an undergrad major if you already know you want to go to pharmacy school.
You can just do it in 6 years.
So some people have done it in 6 years.
Okay.
But I did a long route where I did 4 years of undergrad, then I took a year off, and then I did 4 years.
Okay. And you've worked in the community pharmacy, and you've also done pharmacy in hospitals.
Yeah, so...
What's the biggest difference that you see?
It's vastly different. So the setting in hospital is completely different because you're basically managing every medication for patients in the hospital who've come for anything as small as, most patients are going to be critical because they are in the hospital, but it could be something like a skin and soft tissue infection or bacteremia or patient who's coming after a stroke. So, and then we also verify all the orders online before nurses are able to administer them. But then we also verify batches and IVs that go to get restocked or go to the patients.
Okay. Gotcha. So you don't really interact with the patients, but you have a more holistic view of what that patient needs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do rounds on patients at bedside too, but it's mainly the provider. I don't personally see them, but I see them with the team, so the providers, nurses, when we do rounds on the floors as well. So again, in the hospital too, there's like multiple roles you can assume as a pharmacist.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. So when you start, you've graduated, you've got your degree, you're a pharmacist, full-fledged.
Yeah.
Is there an entry level and then you grow, or what does that look like?
So these days there's so many options you can do even in pharmacy. Fortunately, unfortunately, the easiest field to get into would be community pharmacy, just because there's a high demand right now too, just because of shortage. It's not really a shortage, it's a topic for another day. But just because of the working conditions in community pharmacy have not been the best, a lot of people are not preferring to work in those settings. But some of the other settings include, inpatient hospital settings or even industry. Industry is super appealing to a lot of the newer Gen Z kids these days. Just because
industry like corporate? Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of new pharmacists have been able to do fellowships. It's kind of like residency, but it's slightly designed differently. So residencies are preferred if you want to work in a hospital setting. I did not do one, but I was fortunate enough to start a PRN part-time job at my hospital because I had a rotation there. So I knew people. Again, networking really helped me out. And eventually I was just able to work. But so yeah, there's different routes, and you can do a fellowship or residency if you're interested in those paths.
So the fellowship sounds more like what I did of an entry level program.
Right.
So once you're in the field, so you're now a pharmacist, you're working at the hospital.
Yeah.
Do you have growth opportunities, or does it kind of stay at this is the role into perpetuity?
That's a great question. So there are roles you could move into where you could do things like being a clinical coordinator, or you could be the director or the assistant director, especially in a hospital. Or if you are in a community setting, you could be a store manager, like the pharmacist in charge, or you can be the district support manager or district manager. So so there's definitely ways to climb up too.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's important, because one of the things for me that I found was, and I think this has changed. I will say I've seen this shift at multiple companies now, where growth traditionally was moving into management, right?
Yeah.
You manage a project, you do this one job, but then you start managing people who are managing projects and things. That's the route I took, right? So I started out doing portfolio management as an individual contributor, as well as other roles. I managed some projects and programs, different things.
Yeah.
Then I moved into managing people, which required a very different skill set. It was more around helping them develop, right? And ensure that they're still producing a good output at the end of the day. You also had to deal with HR issues. You had to, it was just a very different dynamic.
Yeah.
It was a lot more of influencing across your peer group, your superiors. There was more politics involved. It was just a very different dynamic than using the skills that you learned in college, right? They've now, a lot of these companies are shifting to also having career growth within a specialty. So if you want to be an architect, which, just to clarify, you have architects that build buildings, right? That's a common field. But then in technology, architects, I'm just oversimplifying this, they build the systems, right? They know how the systems interact.
Right.
So those architects, if you wanted to specialize in architecture, you could move up just from being a specialist, just from knowing that field and becoming an expert.
Yeah.
But within there's growth. And I think one thing that we don't talk enough about is salary.
Yeah.
Right? You start out at one place, but you want to get to another place. What do you do? How do you get there?
Yeah.
What do those avenues look like? So what I'm hearing from you is in the pharmacy space, it sounds like it's more in that as you move into that management, right? You're coordinating
Absolutely.
who's going where, but it's not so much about being a specialist or an expert in something as it is that management side of things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think on a broader way you could say that because okay, so to give you the exact numbers or just a range in general, like retail used to start out at like 120-ish, 130-ish, but then they went down a little bit and then the working conditions got worse, and now they're pulling it back up again to like entice more people. It's similar for hospitals as a starting range. Again, it depends on where you are geographically too. But I know when you get to manager levels, you can get into like 150s, 160s in both settings.
Okay.
However, in industry, people make a lot more.
A ton of money.
A ton more.
I've actually worked with a lot of pharmacists where I am too. Yeah.
Yeah, because they can get like bonuses and things like that too. That takes them to almost like maybe 200s too.
Because that's probably more similar to what you would experience in the corporate world anyways, in your upward mobility and movement there. Because I was going to say for me, when I started, and this has changed, because this was a long time ago, not that I want to be old, but when I started, I made $60,000.
But that was a long time ago, right?
It was a long time ago. You also have to compare amount of schooling, right? I graduated early, but it was a 4-year degree, right? And I started at 60,000, and I think it's a little higher now. But again, it depends on where you are.
But you started in 2012, right?
2012.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so at 60,000, and that has grown over the years.
For sure.
But as you move up, you know, it could go anywhere to the 200s, 300s, depending on how high in the company you choose to go.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a ton of mobility within there, you know, but I think it's important to know that. So within in the pharmacy space, it sounds like there's growth, but it's if you compare 60 to 300, that's a bigger range than the 130s to 200s. Yeah, so it's a little bit more consistent.
True, you could say that.
Yeah, but room to grow.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really cool.
This was really fun.
Yeah, it was. So just in terms of the podcast, right? So what do you foresee for our future meetings?
So for the future, I definitely want to, so we can do it in different seasons or we can do it in different focuses. So one, I want to interview different people because I want, and it doesn't just have to be people who are starting fresh like we did. I also, like in the future episodes, I do want to talk about like someone who wants to transition. Let's say a 30 or a 35-year-old single mom, or it doesn't have to be a single mom, just give an example, who didn't get a chance to go back to school or do what he or could be a single dad too, wanted to go back and do something. But I think that's good because
I think I mentioned my mom ended up doing that, right? She was a nurse. Yeah. She was in management as a nurse, and she went into it as a teacher, right? And it was a very different industry, different salaries, different education requirements, everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, I want to focus on how different people got to where they are in their careers, or it doesn't have to be careers. It could be a random side hustle, or it could be a really cool business. So we'll try to focus on those things in the future too.
I think that sounds really interesting. And I think for me, one thing I want people to get from this is, because I think about, you know, what do I wish I knew starting out? Or what would I tell my children, right, as they go into this? When you think about your careers, first of all, nothing is locked in stone.
Absolutely.
You own your career. Nobody else has ownership of that.
And it's never too late.
It's never too late. And I also think it's important to think about all of the elements of that. You want to enjoy what you do. You want to enjoy working with the people that you work with, because we spend more time at work than we do with our families.
Absolutely.
Which is just an unfortunate reality. So if you don't like the people that you're working with, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to afford the lifestyle that you want. Absolutely. So that's important, you know? And I think understanding the different options that are out there and where those things fall, hopefully it'll help somebody when they make their choices.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better, and that's where we end today.
Okay. All right.
All right, talk to you soon.
Bye.